Folks, let me tell you about Serkaya. He's not your average psychiatrist. No sir. This man is something special. Serkaya didn't come from money or privilege. He grew up in a small town, working hard for everything he got. But he had a gift for listening, a gift for understanding. Now, Serkaya could have used his smarts to make big bucks. He could have opened a fancy practice in the city, but that wasn't his style. Instead, he chose to stay in his hometown. He wanted to help the people he grew up with, the people who needed him most. That's the kind of man Serkaya is. What sets Serkaya apart is his humility. He doesn't put on airs or act like he's better than anyone else. When you talk to Serkaya, you feel like you're talking to an old friend. He has this way of making you feel comfortable, of making you feel heard. And that's a rare thing in this world, let me tell you. Serkaya's approach to psychiatry is different. He doesn't just sit there and nod while you talk. He engages, he listens, he understands, and most importantly, he helps you understand yourself. That's the real magic of Serkaya. He doesn't just treat symptoms, he helps people get to the root of their problems. And he does it all with a kind heart and a humble spirit. Now you might think a man like Serkaya was always humble, but that's not the case. Even the best of us have our moments of pride. And Serkaya was no exception. It took a surprising encounter to teach him the true value of humility, and it came from the most unlikely of sources. One day Serkaya found himself face to face with Mafia Lyndon. Now Lyndon wasn't the kind of guy you'd expect to teach anyone about humility. He was tough, he was rough, and he didn't take kindly to shrinks. But Serkaya had said some things about Lyndon in the past, things that weren't entirely true, and now he had to face the consequences.
Lyndon, I need to apologize. I was wrong about you.
Well, look who's got the guts to admit it. Takes a real man to say he's wrong, Serkaya. Instead of getting angry, Serkaya did something unexpected. He apologized. He admitted he was wrong, and you know what? Lyndon respected that. He saw a man who was willing to swallow his pride and ask for forgiveness. It was a turning point for Serkaya. He realized that true strength doesn't come from being right all the time. It comes from being able to admit when you're wrong. This encounter changed Serkaya. It made him realize the power of humility. He saw how it could break down barriers, how it could create understanding where there was once conflict. From that day on, Serkaya made humility the cornerstone of his practice, and it made all the difference in the world. After his encounter with Lyndon, Serkaya had a new mission. He wanted to help people understand themselves, not just on the surface, but deep down. He knew that real change comes from within, and he was determined to guide people on that journey of self-discovery. Serkaya started by looking at his own practice. He realized that many of his patients were stuck. They were repeating the same patterns, making the same mistakes, and they couldn't figure out why. Serkaya knew that the key was self-understanding. But how could he help his patients achieve that? He began to develop new techniques. He didn't just ask his patients to talk about their problems, he asked them to dig deeper, to question their own thoughts and beliefs, to challenge their assumptions about themselves and the world. It wasn't easy. Many of his patients resisted at first, but Serkaya was patient. He knew that true understanding takes time. As his patients began to understand themselves better, Serkaya saw amazing changes. People who had been stuck for years suddenly found new direction. They made better choices. They formed healthier relationships. They found purpose and meaning in their lives. And it all started with understanding. Serkaya knew he was onto something big, and he was just getting started. Now folks, let me tell you about Serkaya's secret weapon. It wasn't some fancy new drug or high-tech treatment. No, it was something much simpler, and much more powerful. It was listening. Real, active, engaged listening. The kind that makes you feel truly heard and understood. Serkaya knew that most people don't really listen. They're too busy thinking about what they're going to say next, or they're distracted by their own thoughts and worries. But Serkaya was different. When he listened, he gave you his full attention. He focused on you like you were the only person in the world, and that made all the difference. One of Serkaya's patients, let's call him Tom, had been to dozens of therapists before. None of them had been able to help him, but when he started seeing Serkaya, things changed. Tom said it was like Serkaya could see right into his soul. He felt understood for the first time in his life, and that understanding was the key to his healing. Serkaya taught his patients the power of listening too. He showed them how to really hear what others were saying, how to listen without judgment, how to understand instead of just waiting for their turn to speak. And as they learned to listen to others, they also learned to listen to themselves, to hear their own inner voice, to understand their own needs and feelings. It was a powerful tool for healing and growth. Confronting pride, Serkaya versus Dr. Underwicker. Now, not everyone appreciated Serkaya's approach. Some of his colleagues thought he was too soft, too understanding.
He was the opposite of Serkaya in every way. Where Serkaya was humble, I was proud. Where Serkaya listened, I lectured.
It was only a matter of time before these two butted heads. The confrontation came at a medical conference. Underwicker was presenting his latest research. He was talking about how to fix patients, how to make them conform to what he thought was normal.
I couldn't stay silent. I stood up and challenged Underwicker. I asked him if he'd ever really listened to his patients, if he'd ever tried to understand them instead of just diagnosing them.
I was furious. I accused Serkaya of being soft, of coddling his patients instead of treating them.
But I stood my ground. I talked about the amazing progress my patients had made, about how understanding had helped them where traditional methods had failed.
The room was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. In the end, it was clear who had won the debate. Underwicker's pride had blinded him to the needs of his patients. His misunderstanding had led to failure, but Serkaya's humility and understanding had led to success. It was a powerful lesson for everyone in that room, and it would have far-reaching consequences for the field of psychiatry. After the confrontation with Dr. Underwicker, word about Serkaya's methods spread like wildfire. Other psychiatrists started to take notice. They saw the results Serkaya was getting with his patients, and they wanted to know more. Serkaya was happy to share. He didn't keep his methods secret. He wanted to help as many people as possible. Soon, Serkaya was giving workshops and seminars. He taught other mental health professionals how to really listen, how to understand their patients on a deeper level. It wasn't easy. Many of them had to unlearn years of training. They had to set aside their pride and admit that maybe, just maybe, there was a better way. The impact was incredible. Patients who had been struggling for years suddenly started to make progress. They felt heard, they felt understood, and that understanding gave them the strength to change. It wasn't just individual patients either. Entire communities started to change. As people learned to understand each other better, conflicts decreased, relationships improved, people were happier and healthier. Serkaya's methods even started to spread beyond psychiatry. Teachers used them in schools, managers used them in businesses, parents used them with their children. Understanding was becoming a way of life, and it all started with one humble psychiatrist who believed in the power of listening and understanding. Now folks, let me tell you about some of Serkaya's unique methods. He didn't just sit in an office and talk to people, no, he got creative. He knew that sometimes to really understand someone, you need to step into their world. So that's exactly what he did. One of Serkaya's favorite techniques was what he called a day in your shoes. He would spend an entire day living like his patient. If his patient was a factory worker, Serkaya would work a shift at the factory. If his patient was a single mom, Serkaya would spend a day taking care of kids and running a household. It wasn't easy, but it gave him insights that he could never get from just talking. Another method Serkaya used was group therapy with a twist. Instead of having people with similar problems in a group, he mixed things up. He put people from all walks of life together. A CEO might be in a group with a janitor, a teenager with an elderly person. The goal was to help people understand perspectives different from their own, and it worked wonders. Serkaya also believed in the power of nature. He often took his patients on hikes or camping trips. He found that being in nature helped people open up. It helped them connect with themselves and others in a way that was hard to do in an office. Plus, the physical activity and fresh air had their own healing effects. It was just another example of how Serkaya thought outside the box to help his patients. Section 8. The Transformation of Dolphy, a Case Study. Let me tell you about Dolphy. He was one of Serkaya's toughest cases. Dolphy was a young man who had been in and out of therapy for years. He was angry, bitter. He felt like the world was against him, and he pushed away anyone who tried to help. But Serkaya didn't give up on him.
At first, Dolphy was resistant to my methods. He didn't want to talk, he didn't want to understand himself, he just wanted someone to fix his problems. But I was patient. I listened, I didn't judge, and slowly, very slowly, Dolphy started to open up.
One day, Serkaya suggested they go for a walk. just a simple walk in the park. As they walked, Dolphy started to talk. Really talk. He talked about his fears, his hopes, his dreams. He talked about the pain he'd been carrying around for years. And Serkaya listened. He understood, and that understanding was the key that unlocked Dolphy's healing.
Over time, I transformed. I wasn't angry anymore. I started to understand myself, to accept myself. I made amends with my family. I went back to school. I even started volunteering to help other troubled youth.
Dolphy's transformation wasn't just personal, it rippled out to affect his whole community, and it all started with understanding. Section 9. Serkaya's growing influence, from local hero to national icon. As word of Serkaya's success spread, he started to gain attention beyond his small town. News outlets picked up on his story. They were fascinated by this humble psychiatrist who was changing lives through understanding. Soon, Serkaya was being invited to speak at national conferences, to appear on talk shows, to write books. But Serkaya didn't let the attention go to his head. He remained humble. He used his growing platform to spread his message of understanding. He talked about the importance of listening, of trying to see things from other people's perspectives, of being willing to admit when you're wrong and learn from your mistakes. Politicians started to take notice too. They saw how Serkaya's methods were transforming communities, reducing crime rates, improving mental health outcomes. They wanted to know how they could implement these ideas on a larger scale. Serkaya was happy to advise them, but he always emphasized that real change starts with individuals, with each person making an effort to understand themselves and others better. As Serkaya's influence grew, he became something of a national icon. People looked to him for guidance not just on mental health issues, but on how to live a better life, how to build stronger relationships, how to create more harmonious communities. Serkaya took this responsibility seriously. He knew that his words and actions could have a big impact, and he was determined to use that influence for good. Section 10. The moral of the story: humility triumphs over pride. Now folks, let's talk about the big lesson in all of this. The moral of Serkaya's story. It's simple, but it's powerful. Humility triumphs over pride. Understanding leads to success, while misunderstanding leads to failure. We've seen this play out again and again in Serkaya's journey. Remember Dr. Wicker? His pride blinded him. He thought he knew best. He didn't listen to his patients. He didn't try to understand them. And where did that get him? Nowhere good. His patients didn't improve. His colleagues lost respect for him. His pride led to his downfall. But Serkaya? His humility was his strength. He was always willing to learn, to admit when he was wrong, to see things from other people's perspectives. And look where that got him. His patients healed, his methods spread, he became a national hero. All because he was humble enough to listen and understand. This isn't just true in psychiatry, it's true in all areas of life. In our relationships, our jobs, our communities. When we approach life with humility and a desire to understand, we open ourselves up to growth, to connection, to success. But when we let pride take over, when we refuse to understand others, we close ourselves off. We stagnate, we fail. Section 11. Serkaya's Legacy, a nation changed by understanding. As we wrap up our story, let's look at Serkaya's legacy. It's not just about one man, it's about how one man's ideas changed a nation. Serkaya's message of understanding and humility spread far and wide, and it had a profound impact. In schools, teachers started using Serkaya's methods. They focused on understanding their students, not just teaching them facts. And you know what? Test scores went up, behavior problems went down, kids were happier and more engaged in their learning, all because they felt understood. In businesses, managers adopted Serkaya's approach. They listened to their employees, they tried to understand their needs and perspectives. And productivity soared, employee satisfaction skyrocketed. These companies became more innovative, more adaptable, more successful, all because of understanding. Even in politics, Serkaya's influence was felt. Politicians who embraced his ideas of understanding and humility found more success. They connected better with voters. They were able to bridge divides and find compromise. Slowly but surely, the political climate began to change. It became less adversarial, more cooperative, all because people were making an effort to understand each other. Serkaya's legacy lives on in every person who chooses understanding over judgment, who chooses humility over pride, and in doing so they continue to change the world for the better.